5 years passed like slow water over stones. The Volanthi homeworld healed from the fear of near destruction. Cities grew taller. Trade flourished. Children were born who had never known the terror of the Silence Maker. Life moved forward, as life always does. But in the palace at the heart of the capital, Queen Lysara remained frozen in time. Her council brought suitors from across the galaxy. There were Volanthi nobles with ancient bloodlines. There were princes from allied worlds with fleets of ships and mountains of gold. There were warriors and poets and scientists. Each one knelt before her throne and offered everything they had. She refused them all. "My queen," her chief advisor said after the 12th rejection, "you must think of your people. The throne needs an heir. Our civilization needs a future." Lysara's purple eyes grew cold. "I am thinking of my people. I am thinking that I will not marry someone I do not love simply because it is convenient. Love is a luxury for common people. Queens must be practical." "Then perhaps I am not a good queen." She dismissed him with a wave of her silver hand. The lights beneath her skin pulsed with irritation. She knew her council whispered about her. They said she was obsessed with a ghost. They said she was wasting her life mourning a human she had known for less than an hour. They were not entirely wrong. Every evening, when her duties were finished, Lysara walked to the central square. She stood before the statue of Daniel Cole and looked up at his bronze face. The artist had captured his expression well. He looked calm and brave and slightly amused, as if death was simply another adventure he was curious to explore. Sometimes she spoke to him. She told him about her day. She complained about her advisors. She described the sunset colors and the way the flowers in her garden were blooming. She knew he could not hear her. She spoke anyway. Her handmaiden Cerise followed at a respectful distance each night. She never interrupted. She never judged. But one evening, she finally gathered the courage to ask the question that had burned in her mind for years. "My queen, forgive me, but I must understand. You spoke to him once. One single conversation. How can you mourn him so deeply?" Lysara was quiet for a long time. When she finally answered, her voice was soft as falling snow. When he flew his shuttle toward that weapon, he knew he would die. Every creature in the galaxy would have been afraid. Even the bravest warrior would have shown some fear. She paused and touched the base of the statue gently. But he was not afraid, Cerise. I watched his face on the communication screen. He was at peace. He was happy. He smiled at me and said goodbye like he was leaving for a short trip and would return soon. Perhaps he was simply brave. No, it was more than that. In that moment, he looked at me like I was the most important thing in the universe. Like saving me was not a sacrifice, but a gift he was giving himself. Lysara's lights flickered with emotion. No one has ever looked at me that way. Not before, not since. How can I marry someone else when I have seen what true devotion looks like? Cerise had no answer. She simply bowed her head and remained silent far across the stars on a small blue planet called Earth. A young woman named Katie Cole was asking her own questions. Katie was 30 years old now. Her brother had been dead for 5 years, according to the official records. The United Earth Coalition had given her a folded flag and a medal. They had told her Daniel was a hero. They had told her to be proud. She was proud. She was also angry. And she absolutely refused to believe he was gone. Katie worked at a quantum physics research center in Colorado. Her colleagues thought she was brilliant but strange. She spent her days studying normal scientific problems. She spent her nights chasing ghost signals across the galaxy. Her supervisor had called her into his office twice to discuss her unhealthy obsession. Her friends had gently suggested therapy. Her mother had stopped asking about her work because the answers always ended in tears. Katie ignored them all. She knew her brother. Daniel never did anything without a plan. He never went anywhere without leaving a trail. Even as a child, he had always found his way home, no matter how lost he got. On the 5th anniversary of his disappearance, Katie sat alone in her lab at 3 in the morning. Empty coffee cups surrounded her like a small army. Her eyes burned from staring at screens. Her back ached from hunching over keyboards. She was about to give up for the night when her equipment detected something. It was faint. It was buried under layers of cosmic noise. Any other scientist would have dismissed it as random interference, but Katie recognized the pattern immediately. It was the personal emergency beacon that every United Earth Coalition officer carried. It was broadcasting a specific code, Daniel's code. Her hands trembled as she traced the signal. It was coming from an uncharted sector of space, far beyond any explored territory. The signal was weak because it was incredibly distant. But it was real. It was there. It was him. Katie began to cry. Not sad tears, happy tears, angry tears. Tears that said, I knew it, I knew it, I always knew it. She spent the next week confirming her findings. She checked her equipment 100 times. She ran the data through every analysis program she could find. The results were always the same. The signal was genuine. Daniel Cole was alive somewhere in the void between stars. Now she just needed to find someone who would believe her. The United Earth Coalition was not interested. They had closed Daniel's file years ago. The military commanders she contacted told her she was wasting their time. The scientists she approached said her data was probably corrupted. Katie was ready to steal a ship and go looking herself, when she finally found someone who would listen. Her name was Nina Reyes, and she was the captain of a small science vessel called the New Dawn. Nina was 50 years old, with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had lost her own brother in a mining accident 20 years ago. She understood what it meant to refuse to let go. Your data is good, Nina said after reviewing Katie's findings. The signal is real. I cannot promise we will find him alive, but I can promise we will look. Katie shook the captain's hand with both of her own. That is all I am asking. Just look. Please, just look. 3 weeks later, the New Dawn launched quietly from a civilian spaceport. No official mission orders. No military escort. Just a small ship with a determined crew heading into the unknown. And far across the galaxy, standing before a bronze statue in the growing darkness, Queen Lysara felt something stir in her chest. She did not know what it was. She did not understand why her lights suddenly pulsed brighter than they had in years. But somewhere in her ancient Volanthi heart, hope began to bloom again. She looked up at Daniel's frozen bronze face and whispered words she had never dared to speak before. Come back to me, please. Somehow, come back. The universe, vast and mysterious, listened to her prayer. And far away, in a pocket of frozen time, something began to wake. The alarm screamed through the corridors of the starbound horizon like a wounded animal. Red lights flashed against metal walls as crew members ran to their stations. Daniel Cole gripped the edge of his console and stared at the display screen. What he saw made his blood run cold. A massive weapon was falling toward the Volanthi homeworld. It was not a bomb in the normal sense. It was something far worse. The rogue faction that had built it called it the Silence Maker. Once it reached the surface, it would release energy waves that would kill every living thing on the planet within hours. 12 billion Volanthi would die. Their entire civilization would end in a single afternoon. Daniel was 32 years old. He had grown up on a small farm in Kansas, where the biggest excitement was watching storms roll across flat fields. He had joined the United Earth Coalition because he wanted to see the stars. He had never expected to witness the death of a world. All ships are too far, the captain announced over the communication system. We cannot intercept in time. I am sorry. Daniel looked at the numbers on his screen. The captain was right. No ship in the fleet could reach the weapon before it hit the atmosphere, but a shuttle could. A small, fast shuttle with no weapons and no shields could reach it. The shuttle would need to carry the experimental countercharges they had in Cargo Bay 3, and someone would need to fly it manually into the weapon's path. It was a suicide mission. Everyone on the bridge knew it. That was why no one suggested it out loud. Daniel thought about his sister Katie back on Earth. She was probably in her lab right now, drinking too much coffee and arguing with her colleagues about quantum physics. She would be angry when she found out what he had done. She would probably throw something at his memorial photograph. He smiled at the thought. Then he stood up from his console and walked toward the door. "Lieutenant Commander Cole," the captain called out. "Where are you going?" Daniel turned and looked at the older man. "To Cargo Bay 3, sir." "Then to Shuttle Bay 2. The captain's face went pale. "That is not an order, Cole. I am not asking anyone to do this." "I know, sir. That is why I am volunteering." He did not wait for permission. He did not wait for anyone to talk him out of it. He simply walked through the door and let it close behind him. The shuttle was small and cramped. Daniel loaded the countercharges himself while the cargo crew watched in silence. They knew what he was doing. They knew he was not coming back. One of them, a young woman with tears in her eyes, handed him a cup of coffee. "For the road," she said quietly. Daniel drank it in 3 gulps. It was terrible coffee. He had never tasted anything so wonderful in his entire life. The shuttle launched at maximum speed. Daniel pushed the engines harder than they were designed to go. Warning lights blinked at him. He ignored them. Time was everything now. Every second mattered. As he flew, he opened a communication channel to the Volanti Palace. He did not know if anyone would answer. He did not know if they would even understand him. But he needed to say something before the end. To his surprise, a face appeared on his small screen. It was Queen Lysara Velthonis herself. She was young for a queen, barely into her 20th cycle by Volanti counting. Her skin was silver like moonlight on water. Her eyes were deep purple, and when she moved, patterns of soft blue light danced beneath her skin. Daniel had met her once before at a diplomatic reception 3 days ago. He had made a fool of himself by staring at her too long. She had noticed and asked him why he was looking at her that way. He had said something stupid about her eyes, reminding him of the northern lights back home. She had called humans surprisingly tolerable and walked away. It was the best conversation he had ever had with anyone. "Human vessel," Lysara said now. "Why are you flying toward the weapon? Your shuttle cannot destroy it." "No, Your Majesty. But the charges I am carrying can. If I get close enough." Her purple eyes widened. The lights beneath her skin flickered rapidly. "You will die." "Yes. Why?" "This is not your world. These are not your people." Daniel looked at her face on the screen. She was so beautiful. She was so alive. In a few minutes, he would be dead, and she would still be alive. That seemed like a fair trade to him. "I met you once," he said. "You were kind to me. You made me laugh. That is enough reason for me." "That is foolish," she whispered. "That is the most foolish thing I have ever heard." "Probably," Daniel agreed. "But I am from Kansas. We are stubborn people." The weapon filled his viewport now. It was huge and dark and terrible. Daniel activated the countercharges and aimed his shuttle directly at its center. "Goodbye, Your Majesty," he said. "Live a good life. For both of us." He looked back one last time. Through the rear camera, he could see the Volanti homeworld hanging in space like a jewel. Somewhere on that world, in that palace, the Queen was watching him fly to his death. He hoped she would not be too sad. Then he hit the detonation switch. The explosion was blinding. Energy ripped through space in all directions. The weapon shattered into a million pieces that scattered harmlessly into the void. The Volanthi homeworld was safe. 12 billion lives would continue, but in the center of the explosion, something strange happened. The energy did not simply destroy Daniel's shuttle. Instead, it tore a hole in space itself. A rift opened, swirling with colors that should not exist. And before the shuttle could be vaporized, it was pulled inside. The rift closed behind it. The explosion faded. The debris drifted away. On the surface of the Volanthi world, people emerged from their shelters and looked up at the sky. They had been saved. They did not know by whom or how. They only knew that they were alive. In her palace, Queen Lysara stood alone on her balcony. She had watched the entire thing on her personal display. She had seen the shuttle fly into the weapon. She had seen the explosion. She had seen the rift swallow the human and then seal itself forever. Her handmaiden found her there an hour later, still staring at the empty sky. The queen's silver cheeks were wet with tears. The blue lights beneath her skin had gone dim. "He was a stranger," Suri said gently. "You did not even know him." "No," Lysara agreed quietly. "I did not. But I wish I had." She ordered a statue built the next morning. It would stand in the central square where every Volanthi could see it. It would show a human man with kind eyes and a stubborn jaw, looking up at the stars. The plaque at its base would read, "He came from the sky. He saved our world. He asked for nothing in return." It was the first monument to an off-worlder in 10,000 years of Volanthi history. And every night for years to come, the queen would stand before it alone, wondering what might have been. The New Dawn traveled for 6 weeks through empty space. Captain Nina Reyes had never been this far from charted territory. The stars here were strange and old. The darkness between them seemed deeper somehow, as if light itself was tired of traveling so far. Katie Cole spent every hour at the sensor station. She barely ate. She barely slept. She watched the signal grow stronger day by day, and her heart grew lighter with each passing moment. The rest of the crew thought she was either crazy or inspired. Perhaps both. They had signed up for this mission, knowing it might lead nowhere. But something about Katie's determination made them believe. If she was willing to chase her brother across the galaxy, the least they could do was help. On the 43rd day, they found it. It appeared on the main view screen like a wound in space. A swirling mass of colors that should not exist. Purple and gold and silver light twisted together in patterns that made the eyes hurt. At its center was a bubble of absolute stillness. And inside that bubble, caught like a fly in amber, was a small shuttle. "That is impossible," the navigator whispered. "That shuttle should have been destroyed 5 years ago." Katie pressed her hands against the view screen as if she could reach through and touch it. The explosion must have created some kind of temporal pocket. He's been frozen in time. For him, no time has passed at all. Captain Reyes studied the phenomenon carefully. "Can we get him out?" The ship's engineer, a nervous young man named Lucas, ran calculations on his tablet. "Maybe, if we extend our shields to encompass the bubble and then collapse it slowly. But if we do it wrong, we could destroy the shuttle and kill him. What are the chances of success?" Lucas hesitated. 30%. Maybe less. Katie turned to face the captain. Her eyes were red from crying. Her hands shook with exhaustion. But her voice was steady as stone. 30% is better than 0. Please, try. Nina Reyes had lost her own brother to a mining accident. She remembered standing at his grave, wishing she had been given any chance at all to save him. Even a tiny chance. Even an impossible one. "Do it," she ordered. "Extend the shields. Bring him home." The next 3 hours were the longest of Katie's life. She watched the shields wrap around the temporal bubble. She watched Lucas make adjustments with trembling fingers. She watched the strange colors begin to fade as the pocket of frozen time slowly collapsed, and then she watched her brother's shuttle drift free into normal space. The shuttle was badly damaged. Its hull was cracked. Its engines were dead, but its life support systems were still functioning on emergency power. And inside, according to the sensors, was one living human being. They brought the shuttle into the cargo bay with tractor beams. Katie ran through the corridors so fast she nearly fell twice. By the time she reached the bay, a medical team was already cutting through the shuttle's hatch. The door fell open with a crash of twisted metal. Inside, slumped in the pilot's seat, was Daniel Cole. He looked exactly the same as he had 5 years ago. Same brown hair, same stubborn jaw, same faded coffee stain on his uniform collar. He had not aged a single day. For him, the explosion had happened minutes ago. His eyes opened slowly. He looked around in confusion at the unfamiliar faces. Then his gaze found Katie, and recognition flooded his features. "Katie?" His voice was rough and weak. "What are you doing here? Where am I?" She threw her arms around him and held on tight. She was crying again. She could not seem to stop. "You idiot. You stupid, brave, wonderful idiot. I found you. I actually found you." Daniel hugged her back, still confused. "Found me?" "Katie, I just flew into that weapon. The explosion was seconds ago. How did you get here so fast?" "Daniel." She pulled back and looked into his eyes. "The explosion was 5 years ago." He stared at her. He looked at the medical team. He looked at the walls of the cargo bay, clearly different from any ship he recognized. Slowly, terribly, the truth began to sink in. 5 years, he repeated quietly. "I have been gone for 5 years." The ship's medical officer, a kind man named Sam Ortega, helped Daniel to his feet. "We need to get you to the medical bay. Run some tests. Make sure you are healthy." Daniel nodded numbly. He let them lead him through corridors he did not know. He let them scan his body and check his vitals. He answered their questions in a daze. 5 years. Everyone he knew had lived 5 years without him. The war he had been fighting was probably over. The friends he had served with had probably moved on. The galaxy had continued spinning while he floated in frozen nothingness. And the Queen. What had happened to the Queen? "The Volanthi homeworld," he said suddenly, grabbing Sam's arm. "Is it safe? Did the weapon destroy it? Is Queen Lysara alive?" Sam exchanged glances with Katie, who had followed them to the medical bay. "The planet is fine," he said gently. "Your sacrifice worked. You saved 12 billion lives. And the Queen?" Katie sat down beside her brother's bed. She took his hand in hers. "She is alive, Daniel. She's been queen for 5 more years. And..." She paused, unsure how to continue. "She built a statue of you in the central square of the capital. It is the first monument to a non-Volanthi in their entire history." Daniel was silent for a long time. He stared at the ceiling of the medical bay without seeing it. His mind was far away, on a silver-skinned world where a young queen had watched him fly toward death. "I need to see her," he said finally. "Daniel, you just woke up from 5 years of temporal suspension. You need to rest. You need to recover. I need to see her, Katie." He turned to look at his sister. His eyes were intense in a way she had never seen before. "I do not know how to explain it. When I flew that shuttle into the weapon, I was not thinking about Earth or the fleet or my duty. I was thinking about her, a woman I spoke to once for 5 minutes. I was thinking that if I died so she could live, that would be enough. That would be a good trade." Katie squeezed his hand. "You barely knew her." "I know. That is what scares me." Daniel laughed softly. 5 minutes, Katie. 5 minutes of conversation, and she became the most important thing in my universe. What does that mean? What kind of person feels that way about a stranger? Maybe the kind of person who recognizes something special when he sees it. Daniel thought about that. He thought about purple eyes and silver skin and blue lights dancing beneath the surface. He thought about a young queen who had called humans surprisingly tolerable and made him feel like the luckiest man alive. "Set course for the Volanti homeworld," he said. "Please, I need to know if she remembers me." Captain Reyes was called to the medical bay. She listened to Daniel's request with a thoughtful expression. Then she nodded slowly. "We will take you there. But you should know something first." She pulled up information on her tablet and showed it to him. Queen Lysara has refused every suitor for 5 years. Her council is desperate for her to marry. But she will not accept anyone. Why not? Nina Reyes smiled sadly. "According to diplomatic reports, she says she is waiting. The reports do not say what she is waiting for. But I think we both know the answer." Daniel closed his eyes. His heart was pounding so hard, he could hear it in his ears. A queen had waited 5 years for a man she thought was dead. A queen had refused princes and nobles because she could not forget a human who smiled at death and told her goodbye. "How long until we reach her world?" he asked. 3 weeks at maximum speed." "Then go at maximum speed, please." The new dawn turned toward the Volanti homeworld. And somewhere across the stars, standing before a bronze statue in the evening light, a queen felt tears begin to fall down her silver cheeks for no reason she could understand. But in her chest, buried deep beneath years of grief and duty, something whispered that everything was about to change. News of Daniel's return spread across the galaxy like fire across dry grass. Within hours, every news network from Earth to the outer colonies was broadcasting the story. The human who had died saving the Volanti homeworld was alive. And he had returned to the queen who had never stopped waiting for him. Reactions were mixed. On Earth, people celebrated. Daniel Cole became the most famous human in history overnight. His face appeared on screens and posters and commemorative plates. Children dressed as him for festivals. Politicians gave speeches about human courage and sacrifice. On the Volanti homeworld, the response was more complicated. The common people loved the story. A romance between their beloved queen and the hero who saved them. It was like something from ancient legends. They gathered in the streets and sang songs of joy. But the noble council was furious. "This is unacceptable," the chief advisor declared at an emergency meeting. His name was Lord Vareth, and he had been trying to marry Lysara to his own nephew for 3 years. A human? The queen cannot marry a human. It has never been done. It goes against every tradition. Queen Lysara sat on her throne and listened to him rant. Daniel stood beside her, dressed in borrowed Volanti clothes that did not quite fit. He looked uncomfortable and out of place. But he did not move away from her side. "Your traditions did not save our world," Lysara said calmly when Vareth finally paused for breath. "This man did. He gave his life for us. He was pulled out of time itself and returned to us after 5 years. If that is not a sign from the universe, I do not know what is. Signs can be interpreted many ways, my queen. The people will not accept this. The people are dancing in the streets right now, Lord Vareth. They seem to accept it just fine." The wrath's silver face flushed with anger. "Then consider the political implications. Earth will see this as an opportunity to influence our government. They will expect favors, trade deals, military alliances." Daniel stepped forward. His voice was quiet but firm. "I am not here representing Earth. I am not here for politics or trade. I am here because I love your queen. That is the only reason. I have nothing to offer except myself." "That is precisely the problem," Vareth sneered. "You have nothing. You are no one. He is the man who saved 12 billion lives, Lysara said sharply. That makes him more important than any prince with a fleet of ships. Now, this discussion is over. I have made my decision. Daniel Cole will remain at my side. If you cannot accept that, you may leave my council. Vareth opened his mouth to protest, but something in the Queen's eyes stopped him. Her lights were pulsing dangerously bright. Her voice had turned to ice. In that moment, she looked every inch the ruler of an ancient and powerful civilization. The advisor bowed stiffly and withdrew. Over the following months, Daniel and Lysara learned each other. They walked through the palace gardens for hours, talking about everything and nothing. He taught her to play poker and laugh when she won every hand with her perfect memory. She taught him to dance in the Volante style, floating steps that required grace he did not possess. She also taught him the Volante art of memory weaving. It was an intimate practice where two people could share emotions and experiences through touch. Most Volante only did it with close family members or lifelong partners. The first time she wove her memories into his mind, Daniel wept. He felt 5 years of grief compressed into moments. He felt her standing before his statue night after night, speaking to bronze that could not answer. He felt her refusing suitors because their eyes were wrong, their smiles were wrong, everything about them was wrong. He felt her hope dying slowly, year by year, until it was just a tiny spark buried deep in her chest, and then he felt that spark burst into flame when she turned around in the garden and saw him standing there. "I am sorry," he said when the memory weave ended. "I am so sorry I made you wait." "You did not make me wait. The universe did, and it gave you back to me." Lysara touched his face gently. 5 years of grief is a fair price for a lifetime of joy. Katie arrived a week before the wedding. She had spent months on Earth, dealing with journalists and politicians who wanted to use her brother's story for their own purposes. She was tired and cranky and immediately fell in love with the Volante homeworld. "This place is incredible," she told Daniel as they walked through the palace. "The architecture, the technology, the culture. I could spend years studying it." "You could stay," Daniel offered. "Lysara would welcome you. She's been asking about human scientists who might want to work here." Katie gave him a knowing look. "You just want family nearby. Is that so bad?" She hugged him tight. "No, it is not bad at all. I spent 5 years trying to bring you home. Maybe home is not a place. Maybe home is just being where the people you love are." The wedding was broadcast across 2 civilizations. It combined human and Volante traditions in ways that had never been attempted before. Daniel wore a suit from Earth with Volante symbols embroidered on the shoulders. Lysara wore a gown that changed colors with her emotions, silver and blue and gold swirling together like living light. They spoke their vows under an open sky, as was traditional for Volante royalty. Their hands were bound together with ribbons of pure light, as was traditional for human ceremonies in the colonies. Katie stood as witness for Daniel. Cerise, the Queen's loyal handmaiden, stood as witness for Lysara when the ceremony ended and they kissed for the first time as husband and wife. The crowd erupted in cheers that could be heard for miles. Later that night, a human journalist managed to corner Daniel at the reception. She was young and eager and asked the question everyone wanted answered. How does it feel to be the first human to marry alien royalty? To be part of history? Daniel looked across the room at his wife. Lysara was speaking with Katie, her lights pulsing with laughter at something his sister had said. She caught his eye and smiled, and Daniel felt his heart swell with a joy he had never known was possible. Honestly, he said, it feels like coming home. The journalist seemed disappointed by the simple answer. She wanted something profound, something quotable. But Daniel had nothing else to give her. The truth was simple. After everything he had been through, after death and time and space itself, He had found his place in the universe, and his place was beside a silver-skinned queen who had waited 5 years for a man she had known for 5 minutes. In the memorial garden, the sunflowers still grew. They had been left untouched, a reminder of darker days. But now they had company. Daniel had planted Kansas wildflowers beside them, seeds his sister had brought from Earth, purple prairie clovers and black-eyed Susans and delicate evening primroses. 2 worlds, 2 civilizations, 2 people from opposite ends of the galaxy. They had found each other against impossible odds. They had waded through years of separation and grief. They had defied politics and tradition and the vast emptiness of space. And now, finally, they were home. Lazar found Daniel in the garden on their first morning as husband and wife. He was sitting among the flowers, watching the sun rise over the silver towers of the capital. "You are awake early," she said, settling beside him. "Could not sleep. Too happy." She took his hand in hers, cool silver against warm brown. "My counsel still does not approve. They will come around, or they will not. Either way, I am not going anywhere." Lazara leaned her head against his shoulder. Her lights pulsed with contentment, soft and warm. "No, you are not. I have decided not to let you." Daniel laughed. "A queen who takes what she wants. Always." They sat together in silence as the sun climbed higher. Around them, 2 different types of flowers bloomed under an alien sky. Behind them, a bronze statue stood in the square, a monument to sacrifice and hope. And ahead of them, stretching out like an endless field of stars, lay the rest of their lives. Together. Finally. Forever. The wind screamed like a dying animal across the frozen plains of Kestrel 7. Snow and ice flew through the air so thick that a person could not see their own hand if they held it in front of their face. The temperature had dropped to 60 degrees below zero, and it was still falling. Inside a small metal hut, Danny Cole sat alone by the thermal generator. The orange glow of the heating unit was the only warm thing on this entire frozen world. He held a cup of synthetic coffee in his hands and listened to the storm, trying to tear his shelter apart. Danny had been on Kestrel 7 for 8 months now. The Galactic Mining Consortium had sent him here to survey the ice fields for valuable minerals hidden beneath the frozen surface. It was lonely work, boring work. But the pay was good, and Danny had learned long ago that humans were willing to do jobs that no other species in the galaxy would touch. He was 32 years old, with dark hair and tired eyes. His body was thick and strong from years of physical labor on colony worlds. Back on Earth, he had been nobody special, just another worker looking for a better life among the stars. Out here, in the far reaches of the galaxy, being human meant something different. It meant being tough. It meant surviving in places where others could not. The galaxy was full of alien species, thousands of them. They had built great civilizations, traveled between stars, and created wonders that humans were only beginning to understand. Humanity had joined this galactic community just 50 years ago, and they were still considered newcomers, children, primitives from a dangerous little planet that most species preferred to avoid. Danny did not mind. He had met many aliens during his years as a surveyor. Some were kind. Some were cruel. Most simply ignored humans as beneath their notice. He had learned to keep his head down and do his job. The storm outside grew louder. Danny checked his instruments and frowned. This blizzard was worse than anything he had seen in his 8 months on Kestrel 7. The wind speed was off the charts. The temperature was still dropping. His little hut was built to survive extreme conditions, but even it was starting to shake. He was about to run another diagnostic on his heating system when he heard something strange. A sound that did not belong to the storm. A banging noise. Weak but desperate. Someone was at his door. Danny jumped to his feet his heart pounding. That was impossible. There was no one else on this part of the planet. The nearest outpost was 200 kilometers away. No living thing could survive outside in this storm. The banging came again. Weaker this time, Danny grabbed his emergency kit and ran to the door. He pressed the release button and the door slid open. The cold hit him like a physical blow, stealing the breath from his lungs. Snow and ice rushed into the hut, covering everything in white. And there, on the ground in front of him, was a body. Danny did not think. He simply acted. He reached down, grabbed the figure under the arms, and dragged them inside. The door slammed shut behind him, and the howling of the storm became muffled once again. He looked down at what he had rescued, and his eyes went wide. It was an alien. A woman, or at least what looked like a woman. She was tall and thin, with long limbs and delicate features. Her skin was pale blue, like the color of ice on a frozen lake. Her hair was silver and long, but now it was matted with frost and tangled with snow. She wore a thin environmental suit that had been torn in several places, and her exposed skin was turning an ugly shade of purple. Danny recognized her species immediately. She was a Valorian. His stomach tightened with a mix of emotions. The Valorians were one of the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy. They had been traveling between stars when humans were still living in caves. They were beautiful, intelligent, and incredibly arrogant. They looked down on younger species the way a grown adult might look down on a crawling baby. Valorians had been particularly cruel to humanity since first contact. They called humans thermal anomalies because of their high body temperature. They refused to shake hands with humans, refused to share meals with them, refused to treat them as equals. In the Galactic Council, the Valorians had voted against giving humanity full membership rights 3 times. And now one of them was lying on his floor. Dying. Danny knelt beside her and checked her vital signs. Her pulse was weak and slow. Her breathing was shallow. Her body temperature was dangerously low. He knew enough about Valorian biology to understand the problem. They came from a warm world, a planet of tropical forests and gentle seas. They had no tolerance for cold. Their bodies could not generate enough internal heat to survive in extreme temperatures. This woman had somehow ended up on one of the coldest planets in the sector, and she was freezing to death. Danny wrapped her in every blanket he had. He turned the thermal generator up to its maximum setting. He pressed hot water bottles against her body and covered her with heated pads. But nothing worked. Her temperature continued to drop. He watched the numbers on his medical scanner fall lower and lower. 34 degrees, 33, 32. If she dropped below 30, her organs would start to fail. She had maybe 20 minutes left to live. Danny sat back on his heels and ran a hand through his hair. He had a choice to make. He could let her die. No one would blame him. No one would even know. The storm had erased all tracks. By the time anyone came looking for her, she would be frozen solid. Just another victim of this harsh world. And why should he save her? Her people had treated humanity like dirt for 50 years. They had mocked humans, excluded humans, and worked to keep humans powerless in galactic politics. This woman had probably never said a kind word to a human in her entire life. But as Danny looked at her pale blue face, he could not do it. He could not just sit there and watch her die. It was not about politics or species or ancient grudges. It was simpler than that. She was a person. She was suffering. And he could help. He made his decision. Danny stripped off his outer clothing, keeping only his thin undershirt and shorts. Then he lifted the blankets and lay down beside the alien woman. He pulled her cold body against his chest and wrapped his arms around her. Humans ran hot. It was one of the things that made them different from most species in the galaxy. Their bodies were like furnaces, constantly burning fuel to maintain a high internal temperature. On Earth, this had helped them survive ice ages and harsh winters. Out here in space, it made them perfect for working in cold environments. Now, Danny hoped it would be enough to save a life. He held the Valorian woman close and let his body heat flow into her frozen form. The cold of her skin was shocking, like hugging a block of ice. But Danny gritted his teeth and held on. Outside, the storm continued to rage. Inside the small hut, a human man held an alien woman and willed her to live. The night was long and dark. But Danny did not let go.